All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly radical paradigm shift in how the Apostle Paul's view of the cross has historically been understood. We are focusing squarely on Paul's revolutionary cost of redemption. To do this, we'll be drawing directly from Mark Bates' analysis of David A. Brondos' work, Paul on the Cross. If you've ever wondered how first-century believers actually understood the mechanics of salvation, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get into it. We're going to break this massive paradigm shift down into 5 quick steps. First, the old mechanical ledger. Second, redefining the ultimate cost. Third, rethinking the proof texts. Fourth, the metaphor of redemption. And finally, God's unified promise plan. So, starting with section 1, the old mechanical ledger, where we question post-biblical frameworks. To really grasp this shift, we first got to look at the status quo of Western systematic theology, the very frameworks that Brondos is challenging. Look at the stark contrast between these two distinct worlds. On the medieval and Western side, theologians like Anselm essentially framed salvation as a timeless legal calculation. Think of it as a mechanical transaction, or a cosmic ledger where divine justice demands an exact payment, which is often framed as penal substitution. But if we look at the first-century Jewish view, which, remember, was the actual cognitive environment of the Apostle Paul, they didn't operate on mechanical ledgers. Not at all. They understood sacrifice and redemption as a historical, relational covenant. It was a narrative of sacrificial petition, not some sterile courtroom exchange. Moving right along to section 2, redefining the ultimate cost and the meaning behind the Greek. Let's see how this builds by looking at the actual language Paul used in his occasional letters to those early messianic assemblies. This point is absolutely crucial. When Paul says Christ died for us, he uses the Greek preposition hyper. This signals representation or doing something on behalf of someone else. It actually does not mean strict spatial substitution. For that, he would have used the Greek word anti. Traditional theories often treat for us as an exact one-to-one ledger exchange, where one person physically takes the exact punishment of another. But linguistic analysis shows us that Paul is pointing to a historical cost meant to benefit us, not a mechanical replacement. Think about it like this. Imagine a firefighter rushing into a burning building. The firefighter dies for a trapped child by enduring those flames. The firefighter isn't a replacement sacrifice meant to appease a vengeful fire, right? Obviously not. The death is the tragic historical result of a highly dangerous rescue mission undertaken purely out of love. And this is exactly how Brondos suggests we understand Jesus' death, as the ultimate historical cost of his unyielding mission to rescue humanity. That brings us to section 3, rethinking the proof texts through a narrative covenantal exegesis. Let's impartially evaluate 3 major biblical proof texts that are heavily relied upon to support that old mechanical view. First up, Romans 3:25. The big question here is, was the mercy seat actually meant to pacify divine wrath? This verse uses the Greek word Hilasterion, which classical commentators, usually drawing on Greco-Roman ideas, often translate as propitiation, meaning an action that pacifies an angry deity. But let's look at the actual first-century context. Hilasterion directly translates to the Hebrew kaporet, which is the mercy seat atop the Ark of the Covenant. Back in the Old Testament, the mercy seat was highly restricted, hidden away and accessible only to the Jewish high priest. Brondos argues that by presenting Christ as a public mercy seat, God didn't execute vengeance to pacify anger. Rather, he blew the doors wide open. He removed the ceremonial boundaries, making covenantal forgiveness publicly accessible so Gentiles could access the covenant without having to first become ethnic Jews through ceremonial works. It's all about access, not appeasement. Next, we have Romans 8:3-4. This is a passage cited all the time to claim that God legally executed his own son on the cross. But is that what's really going on in the text? Well, if we look closely, the text actually says God condemned sin in the flesh. Literally, God didn't condemn his son, he condemned the tyrant of sin itself. It's like a massive regime change. God is legally overthrowing a tyrannical ruler, sin, to establish a new, clean, sovereign government through the Spirit. It's a profound act of liberation, not the execution of an innocent substitute. And finally, Galatians 3:13. This one trips people up a lot. Paul boldly states that Christ became a curse for us. Does this mean Jesus suffered the internal moral curse of complete divine abandonment? Brondos makes a super fascinating distinction here between 2 different types of biblical curses. First, you have the curse of disobedience, which is a moral violation of God's covenant. Second, there's the curse of the tree, which is a strictly physical, ceremonial, and external execution. Jesus was perfectly sinless and completely obedient. He never endured the moral curse of disobedience. Instead, he historically accepted the external, physical curse of being executed on a Roman cross. And the purpose? To break down those covenantal barriers and bring the ancient blessing of Abraham to all nations. Which leads us to Section 4, the metaphor of redemption, and rethinking Apolytrosis. This is all about how we define redemption itself in the original text. We often hear the commercial view, this Anselmian idea of paying a literal monetary debt to a cosmic banker, treating redemption like a commercial transaction, paying off an abstract principle of justice. Now compare that to Paul's actual intent, which is much more metaphorical. When we say an Olympic athlete paid a high price for a gold medal, or a soldier paid the ultimate price for freedom, we are talking about them handing over a stack of cash, right? We're talking about sweat, effort, and immense personal sacrifice. The blood of Christ is the ultimate price, because Jesus sacrificed literally everything historically to establish the new covenant community. Now, for Section 5, God's unified promise plan. Let's look at the canonical big picture. To truly grasp Paul's revolutionary cost of redemption, we have to zoom all the way out to what theologian Walter C. Kaiser Jr. famously calls the promise plan of God. This traces a single, unified, divine purpose from the very dawn of history in Eden, all the way down to the 1st century. The cross wasn't some sudden emergency detour designed to abolish Israel's history or laws. No way. The cross is the grand climax of an organic, unified plan. It perfectly fulfills the servant vocation of Isaiah to gather Israel and bring light to the nations, completely preserving God's irrevocable promises to ethnic Israel while uniting both Jews and Gentiles into one covenant body. Now, it's absolutely crucial we look at both sides of the academic aisle here. Bates impartially points out that while Brondos' narrative focus is incredibly valuable, we shouldn't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Brondos sometimes downplays the very real forensic or judicial tension found in Paul's undisputed letters, like 2 Corinthians. Classical forensic models still provide deep pastoral assurance to millions of people regarding the gravity of guilt and the absolute holiness of God. That's why many scholars favor narrative forensic hybrids, like those developed by N.T. Wright. They offer a much more balanced approach, honoring both the historical narrative cost and the true judicial weight of the text. Ultimately, this theological deep dive invites us to radically shift our perspective. It invites us to view the cross not as a cold, mechanical lever pulled in some cosmic courtroom, but as the deepest, most profound act of covenantal faithfulness in all of human history. The cost of redemption was historical, and it was born out of an unyielding dedication to a divine rescue mission. So, I'll leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. If we step away from viewing salvation as a simple mechanical calculation and instead embrace it as a dynamic historical rescue mission, how does that change your own role within the covenant today? I highly encourage you to rethink how this ancient, narrative-driven understanding of the text transforms the very way you read the scriptures. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep asking the big questions.